My name is Eric Averill, and I'm joined by my partner, Brandon Averill. Today,
Disclaimer: Eric Averill and Brandon Averill are the co-founders of AWM Capital. Due to industry regulations, it's essential to explicitly state that investment or strategies mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you, and you should discuss your specific situation with a qualified, certified financial planner. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of AWM Capital or its affiliates. For more information, visit athleteceo.com.
hey everyone, welcome back to the Athlete CEO podcast. I'm your host, Eric Averill. Excited for our show today, more than anything because we're sitting down with one of my closest friends that I've known for over a decade and has had a huge influence on my life, not just from a friendship, but also from a professional development side. Josiah Igono has been someone who has challenged me to become not only a great husband, a good friend, but has really shaped the way that I think about relationships and performance. And so, Josiah, welcome to the show. Excited to have you on today.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. Just so you guys know, this is the man right here. It's been great to watch you grow, man, through the years as a friend and as a colleague. And, man, you know, what you're doing is huge, and we would be remiss if we don't take notes, man, because what you're doing is big, man. I'm proud of you, man. I really mean that. You've been doing some big things, and I know that the sky's the limit for you, man.
Wow, man. Well, I obviously really appreciate that and humbled by those words, but really excited for our audience. You know, as we talked about, we've got a lot of professional athletes listening into this show, and here you are as the director of peak performance at the major league level for the Texas Rangers. And so you're dealing with these guys day in and day out on performance across many levels. And then for the business people listening in, I know that you've ran your own business, and we were just chatting of how vital you are to the front office of the Texas Rangers. It's not just dealing with players on the field, but coaches and front office as well. So I know we've got a lot of things that are going to be super relevant to everybody who's listening today. And a place where I wanted to start was just why you choose to use the word peak performance. You know, there's a lot of terms out in your world. Tell me what you define as peak performance.
Well, first of all, it's a great question. And a lot of people ask the same thing, like, what is peak performance? What is that? Never heard of that before. In essence, you know, the realm that I'm in is sport and performance psychology, right? And unfortunately, I know this is going to be controversial, but I ain't afraid of a little controversy. Unfortunately, the world of performance, or the world of psychology, is broken. It's built on brokenness, dysfunction, problems, and I don't like it. And what has happened is that it's been branded very negatively, particularly with athletes and high-level performers. And so what you have is, such and such is struggling. Go see the shrink. Go see the guru. Go see the psychologist, because you can't figure it out. And I hate that. When you look at psychology, man, psychology is understanding why people do certain things in certain situations. That's what it is. Period. Full stop. If I were to pull a room, which I've done many times, how many of you guys want to get better? Everyone's hands raised. You know what I mean? Everyone's hands is raised. And so when you look at peak performance, what it is I look at it as a continuum. Peak performance is a continuum. And on that continuum, you have individuals who on one end are high-level performers, you know, all-stars. They're contributing to their team. They're very valuable to their organizations, right? And you know, they're the choice. They're the elite. In the middle of that continuum, you have individuals who are neither here nor there, probably, you know, middle of the road performers, better than most, not quite where they want to be, and they're moving at a snail's-like pace, some of them, through their careers, right? And then on the other end, you know, you have individuals who may be suffering from long-term injury, who are dealing with grief, who just got demoted, who they're not doing too well, right? And when you look at this continuum, on any given day, an individual can fall down that continuum. You can have a major life event. You can have an injury. You can be demoted. The game could just say, you know what, we're done with you. At the same token, on any given day, you can slide up that scale, right? You get called up to the big leagues. You have a major life event that's positive, like the birth of a child, or, you get a chance to sign, you sign the big deal, right? And in our position, the way we look at peak performance, sport and performance psychology, is we need to prepare the athlete to improve his position. We need to prepare them to improve their position. So whether they are dealing with grief, right, of a death or a loss of a family member, whether they are dealing with, hey, I just want to get better, right? We want to prepare them to improve their position, and that's all it is. And I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, and the way that you just frame that, I don't think there's any human being that would not say, I want that. So it's really interesting, because working with our clientele, we're fortunate to work with 80 big leaguers, and being a former athlete myself, you're right. The usual thought process around guys in your position is, I only go to them when I've got the yips, or, I'm having negative thoughts at the plate, or maybe I'm not progressing from one level to the next. It's rarely a proactive approach of how do I get better? And so what have you done, specifically from your background of starting in the minor leagues, right, with these guys, is even beginning as a strength and conditioning coach in the rookie ball to obviously where you're at today, is someone that comes new into your organization. How do you start this conversation with players?
The first thing, great question. The first thing that you have to do is you have to define it, right? That's half the battle. I got to own the pieces. I got to know what the definition is. What is it? What is this? And hopefully I've clearly laid out what that is. And then the next thing you have to do is you have to create an environment of learning. Dude, we're living in a day and age where if you're not able to take information, assimilate it, and apply it to your craft, eat the fish, spit out the bones, you're going to get left behind, man. You're going to get left behind. And, I had a recent conversation lately, and this is just my personal opinion. This is my personal opinion. As it relates to, the trajectory of the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, I feel like Major League Baseball is behind in this area. However, and people are like, oh, you're behind in this area, but I believe that in between 3 to 5 years, Major League Baseball is actually going to be leading in this area, because Major League Baseball welcomes the analytics. They welcome the information almost to a fault at times, but I believe that we are behind right now, but in 3 to 5 years, they're going to be the leaders. And back to your original question, you have to create an environment of learning. You have to challenge, you have to critique, right? Constructive criticism, and you have to be able to increase the bandwidth for your players, your coaches, your front office to use this information for themselves. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to listen to information. Players don't want to listen to information if they can't apply it for their own personal gain. As selfish as that might sound, that's the truth.
Yeah, it's the whole point, right? I mean, I'm not reading so many of these books just for information, right? It's transformation, it's development, it's progress. And so you hit on the importance of creating an environment of learning. For an athlete, I think this is one of the things I see the biggest struggle with is, especially in baseball, make no mistake about it, it's difficult. You play a long season, right? And you're, especially even in the big leagues, while you're staying in nice hotels, you're still flying, changing time zones, you're dealing with family, you're dealing with friends, you're dealing with a lot of media and all these type of things. Is for an athlete, how do you practically develop an environment of learning and start to develop the habit of being a lifelong learner? What advice do you give to players?
Start small. What I believe in is I believe in creating layers. So what I mean by that is, if you say, hey, Joe, man, I'm hungry, let's go get something to eat. And I say, oh, okay, let's go to Fogo de Chao Brazilian restaurant. You're like, yo, man, nah, man, that's too much. Well, you just said you're hungry. Well, let's go to Chipotle. Oh, okay. So what you have to do is you have to adjust it to the appetite and to the, again, I'm going to use the word bandwidth of the player, right? So what we do is we create layers, right? So if a player comes up to me and says, man, I want to learn more about focus. Okay. Here's a quote. Here's a presentation. Here is a book. Here's a video. Here's an article. And by the way, if you want more, I got more, right? So you got to create these layers so that it's palatable. It has to be palatable. So, it's going to satiate my hunger, my desire to learn. And then the athlete then takes it and says, you know what? I want more. Or, you know what? This is enough. Let me chew on this right now. And so you have athletes. We have athletes, man, on our big league, team, all the way down to the Dominican Republic, reading books. They're crushing podcasts. They are, looking at videos that are going to help them as far as peak performance. And so for me, it's very important to create layers. And another thing, Eric, that I'm going to add here too is, it's almost like this. I call it restaurant psychology, right? So you go to a restaurant, finest restaurant in town. I'm about to get a steak. I'm about to get that ribeye, right? I order a ribeye. And they bring me out this nice, beautiful steak. But unfortunately, it's not a ribeye. It's a T-bone, right? It looks good. It smells good. It's charred perfectly, perfect temperature. But, dude, you brought out the wrong thing. I didn't want that. And so we have to mimic the same thing with our department is, you know what do they want? And let's prepare it exactly to what they want. And then let's continue to challenge them as they go along their journey. And that's where this game is going, individualization. That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So with your guys, they're entering into the off season. What are the biggest mistakes you're seeing players make in the off season when it comes to peak performance? And then kind of the flip side, the second part of that question is, if you were blank slate and a player came to you and said, Joe, regardless of the year I just had, I want to get significantly better this offseason, where do I start?
That's a great question. I'm not going to tell you the name, but we have one of our players that reached out to me. It was literally, I think, yesterday. And he's just like, hey, man, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And, like, let's go. What do you got? Like, let's go. I want to – and when you got 25 guys doing that, you're going to be hard to beat. I want to answer your question very directly. You said, what are the biggest mistakes people make in the offseason, as it relates to peak performance? I'm a very big believer in rest. You got to rest, man. I don't care whether you're talking about psychologically. I don't care if you're talking about physiologically. If you do not rest, you will crush all gains. I'm just telling you that's just a natural phenomenon. If you do not rest, you will crush all gains. So what has to happen is there has to be a period of time where these athletes are able to reflect, coaches are able to reflect, and they are able to synthesize all the lessons, all the good, the bad, the indifferent that happened during the course of the year. And in this process, right, you fine tune and you prune and you say, you know what, this worked well. I need to do this better. Did well, do better. I love that formula, as it relates to improvement. What did I do well? What can I do better? And so there has to be a time of reflection. There has to be a time of rest. At the same time, you need to, this is the time where you gather, right? You gather information. I don't care what journey you're going on, whether it's a proverbial journey, whether it's a physical journey, you have to gather. You have to gather resources. You have to gather information. You have to gather people around you that are going to help you along this journey. And this is where you formulate your plan. You formulate your plan after that period of rest, right? You formulate your plan and you start attacking that thing. Do simple better, easy, greatness to me is rooted in simplicity. And so once you've gotten that time away and you can strategize accordingly and think about what happened, you put that plan together and you start attacking that sucker. Because what you do now is going to be directly related to what you're going to do when that 162 comes knocking.
Yeah. So something that I love that you said is we've got to create the space for rest and reflection, right? I think it's the same way when we're reading a book is you can just pour through it, but did you actually sit and wrestle with the material? Are you applying it to your life? Part of that rest and reflection is creating that space, but then something you said next is that plan. Can you talk about the importance of vision and clarity of what you're trying to accomplish? I mean, one of the things that I see dealing with people when it comes to their finances, or just even players talking about their careers, a lot of times I think there isn't a lot of progress because there's not a lot of clarity of where they're even trying to go. Can you talk about your thoughts on the importance of vision or planning or clarity? Or you could blow up the whole thing and say, Eric, it doesn't matter. I don't know. But that's a question I have.
No, great question. It's a beautiful question, and it's something I've actually been thinking about a lot lately. If you don't have those basal measures, right? If you don't have those baseline measures, how in the world are you going to know if you improved? How will you know if you improved? You have to have a baseline. You have to have a baseline. When you have that baseline, then you can construct a plan. The Roman Colosseum, it took them 10 years to build that. 10 years. And we live in a modernized society now, so if a multi-million-dollar magnate wants to build a building, all you have to do is get a couple of, permits, get the task force ready, and that thing is built up in, a couple of months, right? And you're good to go. The Roman Colosseum took 10 years to build, but you know what? It still stands today.
Right.
With 3 to 4 million people every year still going to it. Why? Because of the planning, because of the deliberate intentionality. The builders saw something great, and they said, in order for us to build high, in order for us to build with longevity, we got to dig deep, and we got to take our time, we got to do it right. I don't care if you're talking about a strength conditioning program. I don't care if we're talking about your nutrition. I don't care if you're talking about a peak performance routine that's going to help you become a better performer. You have to have a plan. Where there is no vision, the people perish. And if you don't have a plan, how are you going to know where you're going, right? If you're going to be my leader, you better know where you're going, dude. Because if you don't know where you're going, I'm not following you. And the same can be said for your career. If you don't know where you want to go and you don't know where you currently are, you are in trouble. So the biggest thing that can be done is to have those baseline measures. You got to know where you are, right? And I know that you do a great job of this as far as assessing where guys are in terms of their financial goals and whatnot. You got to know where you are, right? Because once you know where you are, you have a true north. And then as soon as you know where you are, you can have that, you start to put those plans. And performers always perform from strength. They don't perform from weakness. You can't be a high level performer and perform from weakness. You always perform from strength. So I'm going to take that, right? And I'm going to construct a plan and build on this plan. And then guess what? A month later, 2 months later, a year later, we're going to look back at those baseline measures and we're going to be able to see, man, you know what? We've really improved. Or you know what? This is not working. We're actually going backwards. So we have to change. I don't care what we're talking about, Eric, whether it's, in the weight room, or in life. If you do not have a plan, you will not have clarity. And if you do not have clarity, you will not have progress. They work hand in hand with each other.
Yeah, man, that's powerful. When you're talking about clarity and having those baseline metrics, right? In the financial world, it's very easy because they're very quantitative, right? We can say balance sheets, net worth statements, and those type of things. For the athlete, what are some of those baseline things that you believe every athlete should be tracking?
As it relates to what exactly? As it relates to peak performance, mental skill?
Peak performance. Because I think what I'm getting at or what I've seen and with your background, I think being a former collegiate D1 football player, the strength and conditioning coach, to being the director of peak performance over a minor leagues, and now at the highest level at the big leagues, is you've seen kind of career progressions right throughout. And everybody always says talent only gets you so far. The separator between, the guy who's just good and then the guy who becomes great or sticks it's all mental, right? And so if I hear that the separator at the big league level is the mental game, what are those baseline things that I need to be constantly progressing in when it comes to peak performance?
Great question. So, when you look at those basal measures, those baseline measures, it can go 1,000 different ways, right? But I'll give you some core ones. Confidence, right? How do you measure confidence? Well, scientifically, people like Albert Bandura and others have, addressed this, and there's all kinds of different ways to build confidence. There's a lot of ways to do that, and there's ways that we use to test that. Perfectionism, right? Is an athlete, is perfectionism good or is it bad? Right? Again, that's a different podcast, but perfectionism is another one. Another one is, learning style, right? Oh, I'm a visual learner. Oh, well, I'm an auditory learner. Oh, well, I'm a kinesthetic learner. What does that mean, right? What does that mean? So we want to make sure we know what that is. There's a myriad of different personality assessments and personality styles out there, and there's varying science and validity behind different ones. We use a handful of different measures. In my personal opinion, there's not one personality assessment that can capture the totality of the human spirit. So you have to triangulate, your information. So we do use some personality assessments, such as the Myers-Briggs and others. As it relates to things like imposter syndrome, right? Which plagues a lot of high-level performers. How does an athlete fare in terms of imposter syndrome? You know what I'm saying? And again, we can go a million miles, one way or the other when it comes to championship body language, right? When it comes to championship vocabulary, when it comes to self affirmations and what an athlete is saying. How about anxiety? That's a huge one. When it comes to performance anxiety, that's a huge one that we've dealt with, over the course of time. And so those are just a handful of basal measures that we use, and that I can go back and we can talk about as, with the athlete as his season progresses, as his career progresses. But those are just a couple,
Yeah.
And it's imperative to understand, our stance this year in 2019 coming up is know yourself, know others, improve yourself, improve others, or I'm sorry, impact others. So let me say that again.
Yeah.
You got to know yourself. You got to know others. You got to improve yourself, and then you can impact others. So if I don't know who I am, how in the world am I going to be able to have any type of compass in my life? I got to know who I am. And some of those things that I just mentioned help to speak to who you are. I got to know others. I got to know my teammate. Eric, I got to know what you like, what you dislike, what pisses you off, what makes you smile, what makes you cry. Because once I know that, I can be a better teammate to you. I can help you when you need help. I can leave you alone when you need space, right? I got to know others. Then I can improve myself. We talked about the basal measures. We talked about having a plan. Now that I know where I am, now I can improve myself. You cannot improve what you have no idea that needs improving. That's why people go to the doctors every year for an annual, because you don't know. You just don't know until the doc gets in there and says, all right, we have high levels of this, low levels of this. Now I can improve myself, and then when I have improved myself, guess what? Now I can impact others. I can impact my teammate. You know what, brother? I've been through that. You know what? When I was, a young guy coming up, this is what happened. This is what I did in this situation. Now I can impact others. And you never get to that place of impact. And we always hear this term of chemistry. Oh, that team has great chemistry. Oh, that team has great chemistry. You cannot get chemistry if you don't have impact. You can't do it. So, those are, some of the ways that we parse through that information to help our athletes.
Yeah, man, that's powerful. I love it, especially the know yourself. This is something that can also be a scary thing, right? A lot of the comments we hear, right, and this isn't just athletes, it's It's most people, it's like, are you comfortable in your own skin? Can you
Yeah.
actually sit in a room for an hour, no TV, no music, no nothing? Can you hang out with yourself? You know, it can be a really scary place. Can you maybe share a few examples how you've helped players through that first step of knowing yourselves? I mean, you mentioned the Myers-Briggs. Are there other resources that you would point people to that aren't fortunate enough to be inside your guys' organization? I know that you have very kind of proprietary tools for the Rangers, but share some examples of how you've helped players go through this know yourself process.
Yeah, great question. Without giving away some of the secret sauce, yeah, that is one of them. You know, we try to honor science, you know, and you know, and make sure that our athletes are getting, you know, legitimate information, resources, and tools. There's different things that we do in terms of, I'll give you one example. One of the things that plagues a lot of athletes, and this is not just an athletic problem, this is a societal issue, particularly for our millennials that are coming up. And millennials is thrown around so much, but it's true. I mean, we are living in a day and age right now where the pendulum has tipped. Like the clock is not even standing up anymore, dude. It's on the ground. Because it's a different generation. It's completely different. And people say, oh, yeah, we got a new generation of kids coming up. Dude, this is a different generation, man. And they don't, and the reason why that's so important is because they don't comprehend, they don't perceive, and they don't attack information in scenarios the same anymore. They don't do it. They do not do it, man. And so, and it is literally rewired the way that their brain is formed, literally. Like literally being, you mentioned it, and that's another, you know, topic for another day, but this thing right here, man, this cell phone, this thing is being used at 150 plus times a day. Average kid is spending between 3 and 4 hours on social media. That's where we were wondering a couple of years ago why there were so many tactile learners, right? It was always visual and auditory, but tactile went through the roof. Why? Because people are getting their information, they're communicating, they're getting their news, they're learning from this thing, and it's changed everything. And so, you said what are some tools that we use? Yeah, we do use some validated assessments and tools. One of the things that we do. In terms of your question, the societal problem is the perception of others, right? The perception of others is one of the number one performance killers. It's one of the number one performance killers. Oh man, I didn't think that my teammate, you know, respected me, or, you know, I feel like I let my teammate down, or they're killing me right now on social media. It is the performance killer. So we go through this exercise where we find out, you know, what are the facts, what are the responsibilities, and what are the assumptions, right? And the assumptions is where everyone is, you know, tries to run in the mud, what they think and what could happen. Oh, I think that might happen. Dude, don't spend any time with the assumptions. Every hero has responsibilities in his or her story. And so when you know what your responsibilities are, and we walk through those, and those come from the athlete, it's like this light bulb moment comes on and says, you know what, I'm not going to pay any more attention to the perception and to what might be, but I'm going to pay attention to what's in front of me and what I can control and what the facts are, and I'm going to, you know, attack it accordingly. So we use a lot of different things, Eric. That's kind of like a loaded question, but we use a lot of different things, and it varies with the player.
Yeah, well, I think even just with that example of what you said of, you can really run any situation through that grid of what are the facts, what are my responsibilities, and then what are the assumptions that I'm making meaning, right? That I'm coming up with this, playing front office, doing these things that are completely irrelevant and out of our control. We hear it all the time, control what you can control, but I think what I'm hearing a consistent theme throughout your conversation is reflection, right? Like it's the analytical part, and it makes sense why you said you think baseball could like could leapfrog a lot of other areas is it's been built into the culture that you can't argue with the numbers, right? And what you're talking about is almost having the analytics of the peak performance side of your career that I can actually look at and evaluate and go, all right, you know, I think of a client we have who, this guy's an all-star, one of the best pitchers in baseball, yet at the end of the year, he had completely changed the way he had pitched because of confidence. I mean, and from the outside, you're sitting there going, are you kidding me? How do you not have confidence? You've got some of the best stuff in baseball. Can you just attack that a little bit? Because I think that's a common thing that a lot of our clients and just athletes in general and people in general is confidence changes a lot. How do you process that with players?
Confidence is huge, man. Confidence is, you know, the thing about confidence is this is how fleeting confidence is, right? Have you ever had a situation where you came into the clubhouse, you came into work, right? And things were going bad at home, you know, you might have been dealing with some stuff. And then, you know, somebody just, you know, during the course of the day comes up to you and says, you know what, hey, man, I see how you've been working. Hey, you know, I really like how you're going about your business. You made a positive impact on my life. Hey, keep it up. Like you're doing great. If you ever need anything, let me know. I just want to let you know that, you know, you've been a real blessing. You've been a real impact in my life. And then all of a sudden, that bad day, you're just like, you know, I feel great. And it carries you for the rest of the day, right?
Yeah.
That, you know, you came in with low confidence and that little interaction that took 30 seconds, all of a sudden now you're on cloud 9, right? Conversely, have you ever had a day where you're feeling great? You know, you had a great week, great performance, you know, the night before, you know, on the mound, in the batter's box, whatever, you killed it, you know. And then you come into work and then somebody just says something to you and then you're just like, yo, man, why would you say that? And it affects you for the rest of the day, if not the rest of the week.
Yeah.
That's how fleeting confidence is. Right? And so there are different ways to build confidence. One of the ways you can build confidence, right? I'm not going to give you all the secrets here today, E, but I'm going to give you some of them. I'm going to give the people what they want, E.
Yeah, I like it.
One of those ways is through your vocabulary. Whatever you think you're going to say, whatever you say, you're eventually going to do. I can tell within talking to people for the first 5-10 minutes, you know, what their performance is going to ensue based on how they speak.
Wow.
It is unbelievable, man. It's unbelievable. There are certain words, and again, this is a different podcast. There are certain words scientifically that have been shown to be related to performance and the lack thereof.
Can you drop a few of them just so we have a taste?
One of them is the word can't. That's one. Can't. One that has been related to performance, to high levels of performance. I'm not going to give you the most obvious one. I'll give you one. Share, right? Share is a word that's related to high levels of performance. So in high performing organizations, groups, teams, guess what's going on? A lot of sharing of information. Hey, man, his slider's pretty filthy, but, man, that fastball, you know, it's always the same spot. Hey, you know, when he does this, you need to do that. Hey, have you read that article about, you know, the brain and brain health? It's awesome. There's a lot of sharing going on in high-level organizations. Back to your those are two words on either end of the spectrum that someone can say that affects confidence, right? Or affects the environment. Another way that you can build confidence is through vicarious experiences, right? So that's a fancy way of saying watching other masters of craft do their thing. So if I'm a left-handed pitcher and I want to build my confidence, I'm going to go and find out who some of the best left-handed pitchers are in the game. And I'm going to see what they do. I'm going to see their body language. I'm going to see how they hold their press conferences. I want to know what they're reading. I want to know what they're doing, right? Vicarious experiences, observational learning. That's psychology 101, observational learning, right? Vicarious experiences. Another way that you can build confidence is through body language, championship body language. 101. Your body language, right, can and will directly affect your levels of free testosterone and cortisol. Cortisol is very much related to stress. Testosterone is very heavily related to performance, power, vigor, and the like. So just the way that you stand or just the way that you comport yourself in high stress situations or in normal everyday life situations is going to affect your confidence, right? Another area that you can, another way you can build confidence is just through, this is a little bit related to what I just shared earlier, but is through affirmations, right? Or reframing what you say. So I'll give you an example. A lot of times you'll hear athletes say, man, I can't get a hit right now. Right? There goes that word. I can't get a hit. So one way that we attack it with our players is we use a reframe. So a reframe goes like this. I'm going to give you the formula right here. Are you ready for it? I'm going to give it to you.
Let's go.
The formula is, instead of saying I can't do X, you say I can do X when I do Y. And you say that all the time. That right there reframes the way you think, and it reframes what you say and ultimately impacts what you do. So instead of saying I can't get a hit, you say I can get a hit when I get the barrel to the ball. I can get a hit when I stay balanced. I can get a hit when I'm ready. I can get a hit when my hands are on time. You see what I did there?
Yeah.
Just that simple exercise right there. Once you can start to get an athlete to saturate their day with doing that hundreds and thousands of times, it becomes ingrained. And all of a sudden, guess what happens to confidence? Those just a couple areas, man.
Yeah. No, super helpful. So talk to me about daily routines. I mean, a lot of what you're talking about are building habits and focusing on process and systems. And, you know, talk to me about how you should be approaching, you know, every morning, every day, or just different rhythms and habits. What advice would you give?
So routines are very important, right? Routines are very important. Whether it's a pre-pitch routine or whether it is a daily routine, you know, whatever it is. And routines, the reason why they're important is because they add consistency to what you're doing, right? They establish a rhythm in what you're doing. Some of the best athletes in the world are very rhythmic. You know, they're very rhythmic, and it's a beautiful thing, whether it's a swing, whether it's, you know, throwing punches, whether it's throwing a football or throwing strikes. Some of the best in the world are very rhythmic. And then the last thing that it does is it establishes the motor pattern, you know, from a physiological sense. So having routines is an absolute must. And when you establish a routine, you know, the most simplistic piece of advice that I give athletes is, what are 2 to 3 things that if I do them, they are going to exponentially increase the probability of success? Many times athletes are, oh man, I'm going to do these 15 things. Really?
Right.
You're going to do those 15 things, right? Okay. Let me know how that works for you. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
So it's like, no. What we got to do is we say, what are 2 or 3 things that I know that if I do these 2 to 3 things, they are going to exponentially increase my probability of success. And when you do that, you reap the rewards of the routine, whether it's a pre-pitch routine, whether it is a daily routine. And again, what it does, it establishes, you know, a rhythm, it adds consistency, and it stabilizes that motor pattern. And it leads to expectancy. It leads to expectancy. I'll give you an example. When Steve Nash played, I love this story because when Steve Nash played, he wasn't really that good in the beginning. He wasn't really that good, but he took it upon himself to use some of these peak performance principles to apply to his craft. I remember when he would get the ball, they used to boo him. They used to boo this guy. You know what I'm saying? And then it got to a place where he worked on his craft, went to the free throw line, and he starts talking about his routine. And what Steve Nash would do is he would take 5 free throws every time. And you might ask him, like, dude, 5 free throws, the most you get is 3.
Yeah.
Right? The most you get is 3. But if you go back, I challenge you to go back and look at YouTube and watch Steve Nash. Steve Nash would take about 2 to 3 imaginary free throws every single time before the ref got him the basketball. And what was he doing? He was working on a pre-performance routine that established a motor pattern, stabilized the motor pattern, added consistency, right? And crystallize his work. I gave you, there's 3 things. It establishes a rhythm, adds consistency, and it stabilizes his motor pattern. So that's what he did. And he did it over and over and over again. And that's what I challenge athletes to do. Find those 2 or 3 things, right? And do them. And it leads to predictable success. So when Steve Nash would go to the free throw line in heated, critical moments, his teammates knew he was going to sink them. But then you look at somebody like Shaquille O'Neal. I love Shaq. But Shaquille couldn't figure it out from the free throw line.
Not at all.
You know what I'm saying? There was no consistency, there was no rhythm, and there was no motor pattern. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, man. That's so helpful. I think when we go through that self-reflection, we could create this huge list, right? And try and tackle all these things as opposed to creating that 1 or 2 that you said has going to have that exponential impact on success, and then to create those habits of rhythms over and over and over again. Shifting back to another thing that you hit on that I've heard you actually give a talk on to the young All-American kids is, can you talk about the perfectionism? Because so much of what I hear, is identity is tied to performance and perfectionism. We don't have a lot of time left on the podcast, so I wanted to make sure we hit on that. Can you address that topic?
Perfection, yeah, absolutely. Perfectionism is an awesome topic. It's very layered, but how we teach you to hear is predicated on some of the work by Dr. Joaquin Stober. And a lot of times when you look at perfectionism, right, there's nothing wrong with striving to be perfect. If I'm a basketball player and I get fouled, I want to make all my free throws. If I'm a pitcher, I want to pound the strike zone. I want to execute my pitches. If I'm a hitter, I want to make sure I'm making contact and I'm getting hits. Like, I want to be perfect. If I'm taking an exam, I want to get 100 out of 100. There's nothing wrong with striving for perfection, right? There's nothing wrong with it. You want to be perfect. You want to make all the plays. You want to, hit all those performance measures and all those performance metrics. There is nothing wrong with striving to be perfect, period, full stop. The problem now lies in what we call the maladaptive behaviors that happen when perfectionism is not reached. That's where the problem is. There's nothing wrong with striving to be perfect, but the problem lies in the maladaptive behaviors that happen when perfectionism is not attained. So I'll give you some examples. Fear of failure. Perfectionists hate failing, dude. Criticism. Perfectionists hate criticism. They hate it. The chasm that exists between what I thought was going to happen in the game and what actually happens in the game, right? The anxiety, we talked about the fears of what other people are going to think of me because I wasn't perfect. That exists. So these maladaptive behaviors that are present are that's what kills perfectionists. So a lot of times what happens with perfectionism or with perfectionists, they keep their world small. They don't want to reach out, and challenge themselves, because guess what? They got to keep it perfect. It has to be, all the way right. So there's different things that we teach in order for perfectionists to navigate those muddy waters. I'll give you a couple. I'm not going to give the whole presentation right here, but I'll give you a couple things that we teach our athletes to do who might struggle with perfectionism. One of the things that perfectionists don't do is they don't celebrate. You got to celebrate. They don't celebrate small achievements or even big achievements. It's Bill Belichick, dude, right? On the Cincinnati. You know what I mean? It's like, you did great. You did all this. Next game, dude, you're not a robot. Celebrate. And I'm not talking about going getting crazy. Just remember that moment, celebrate it, enjoy it with friends and family. Another thing that perfectionists don't do is they don't, and this sounds weird, but it's true. They don't go all out. A lot of times perfectionists, they will not go all out because guess what? They don't want to mess up.
Yeah. They don't want to fail.
How can you, and this is a rhetorical question, but how in the world can you go all out when there's the presence of a fear of failure?
Can't do it.
It's impossible. You can't do it. If you're afraid to fail, you can't go all out. You can't. And so perfectionists, so that in order to save face, in order to keep the homeostasis, if you will, they will not go all out. They will not push themselves to those limits.
Wow.
Right? It's unbelievable. So they don't go all out. I'll give you another one. I'll give you probably the most powerful one, and I'll skip the other ones. Perfectionists do not know how to separate. They do not know how to separate themselves emotionally from their performance. So should you have emotion when you compete? Absolutely. Absolutely. It should be checked. It should be bridled, but absolutely. But what happens a lot of times is after a bad performance, right? Or after a good performance, perfectionists are not able to separate that after the performance. That is a killer, man. Because I had a great game, I must be a great person. False. I had a terrible game, so that means I'm a terrible person. False. Perfectionists must learn to separate. And when you can do that, you go to another level, man. And I'm telling you, I love it. I don't know if you can tell, but I absolutely love this topic. But, man, we can get into that another time.
Yeah, that, like you said, it deserves a whole separate podcast because especially in the business world, that's the number one thing I see, right, is this – I need to be perfect. I need to be so buttoned up. I can make no mistakes, but then you don't risk. We don't innovate. We don't create. We don't push beyond the limits. And that is so true. And then the identity attached, the not having the ability to separate, man, I see that rampant, and it's what I'm trying to convince my little daughter of, right? Like and my son it's not a performance. Their identity is not based in performance inside the house, and I think that that's something that permeates all the way through. So it deserves its own space. To be sensitive to your time, which thank you so much for giving so much of it, is, there's only a few players in Major League Baseball, and baseball specifically, that get to call you up on a regular basis or text you or open up your app, which has got all of your information. So that's proprietary to you guys. What are some resources that people can get outside of you? What books, what podcasts, where are you pointing people that don't get the privilege to just hang out with you all day?
Well, man, there's so much out there. I guess the best way to answer that is, hey, work backwards. So what is it that you're looking for? Or what are you trying to, what are you trying to accomplish? What's the topic area? I definitely have books that I absolutely love and, that I point people towards. A couple of books, right off the top, Essentialism is a great one. And you know who recommended it to me? You. That's a great book. I love that book, man. I love that book. There's another book that I absolutely love, and I actually buy this book and I give it to many people, my family members, friends. Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. One of the reasons why I love Slight Edge is because it takes all of your life experiences. It takes all the books you've ever read, and it gives you the process and able to, extract, that wisdom. In terms of, man, I can go on and on. Pete Carroll's book, Win Forever, is absolutely amazing. Cal Newport has a book called Deep Work, and this is for just next level. I don't really recommend that book off top, but it's for next level thinkers and thought leaders and people who are doing the serious work of just intellectual property and advancement. My good friend Joshua Metcalf has a book called Chop Wood, Carry Water. That book is phenomenal. It is a book that I give to father and sons. It is a book that I give to big leaguers. It is a book that I give to kids. That book is amazing. And And the reason why it's amazing is because it has a lot of digestible, palatable, high-level psychology in it, but it's applicable to what you're doing. And it's written in narrative format. John Maxwell, I'm a huge Maxwell guy. 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, How Successful People Think. Those are just a couple that have been impactful to me. Talent is Never Enough is another one that he has. Maxwell is a genius. Relentless by Tim Grover. There's a tons in terms of books. But for me, Eric, I think that those books mean absolutely nothing if you cannot apply them. And so wherever you're getting your information from, you better have a plan to apply it, or you're just wasting your time.
That's so good. We're not just trying to consume information for information's sake. There's a new book that just was released last week that I got to get in your hands, called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And it's a ton of what you've been talking about is actual habit formation, and he relates it all the way back to actually belief and identity. But that's one of the things that he just talks about is learning to have a process to consume information, right? To synthesize it. And that's so huge. Baseball specifically, one of the things that we hear, kind of two things that I want to make sure we hit on today, before we go. Two things that I hear from players a lot. I don't want to talk to our mental performance, peak performance guy within the organization. How do you overcome that? And then the second belief that I don't want to get too involved in the mental thinking because I'll just be in my own head and won't be able to perform, right? Almost like that paralysis by analysis. When you hear those from athletes, how do you address both of those?
Those are huge, man. Those are huge. For the first question, it comes down to body work. It comes down to trust. If you don't want to deal with the guy in your organization, I get it. I have athletes. I've had athletes that I've worked with that are going through a lot of different things that they personally don't want the organization to know about. They want to make sure that is as far east is from the west. And I respect that, because man, people are messy and we have problems, and, we have different ways of dealing with things, but man, to attack that, it's trust and, it's body of work. My good friend and mentor, that recently passed away, Dr. Ken Reviza, he put it beautifully. He said, what I do is not for everybody. It's not. My style is not everybody's style. And so simple, yet so powerful, just like Ken was. And for me, I say the same thing. What I do is not for everybody. It's not. My style is not the same. I don't even like the world of that psychology has been built on. You know what I'm saying? So I'm already, in a league by myself in a corner, you know what I'm saying? As I look at what's going on in psychology, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So what I do is not for everybody, and that's cool. But, make sure that you're taking advantage of those resources. And then the second question that you asked was, you remember the second part again?
Just the fear of paralysis by analysis. There's a really bad stigma that almost like if you're a smart guy in baseball or in sports, it's a bad thing, right? Like, yeah, if you think too much, you're going to be in trouble.
Yes. So you know how I answer that? It all goes back down to systems. How are you systemizing your thought, right? We live, not only you, myself, and these athletes that we're talking about, we live in the information age where we are drinking water out of a fire hose, man. There's so much information around us. But the thing about it is you have to have a system of how you take in this information. And you have to, and at the same time, you have to increase your bandwidth to take in this information. Because if you're not increasing your bandwidth during this day and age, you are going to get left behind, my friend. You are going to get left behind. That is just how things go. So if you don't want to open up the can and learn more about, how to get better or improving yourself or, making yourself adept to the different, technology, modes, resources, and how to synthesize them, you're getting left behind. That is just the truth. I'm not trying to be mean. You're getting left behind because there are 12-year-olds that have access to information, that have access to volumes of analytical data that are using that stuff. And those cats are going to be leading. They're going to be the leaders in the future. And so their bandwidth is like, astronomical, much less us. Like, we better take advantage of this information. So it's not the information, Eric. It's how. It's the how. It's the how. How are you, using the information and putting them in their respective systems to benefit you?
That's so good. And I think we can end there as far as content. I mean, it's, you've got me fired up. I've got 1,000 more questions, but we'll have to save that for part 2 and 3. And eventually, as we've talked about, one of these days, if the Rangers ever let you take the governor off, you need a dedicated peak performance podcast. So one of the things, obviously being sensitive to the fact that, you work for a professional sports organization, can people still reach out to you, email, those type of things that you can at least point them in the right direction? How do people get in touch with you? And, how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I know you're gonna get on me for this, but not really big on social media. But I am on the main Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. They can get a hold of me there, Josiah Igono, and then my email address. You know what I'm saying? And so it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to find. So they can get a hold of me there. But yeah, man, I've been in building mode, bro. I've been in building mode. You know what I'm saying? My hands have been to the plow. You know what I'm saying? So one of these days I'll get back on those platforms, man. But yeah, man, I'm not hard to get a hold of.
No, man, that's good. And for the listeners, I'll make sure to put Josiah's email in the show notes and links to all of his social media accounts. And really appreciate you spending time with us today, Josiah. It's been a ton of fun. I know that our listeners will benefit from it. So thank you so much.
Hey, E, thank you, man. Thank you, man. You're doing big things, bro. Hey, I might need to get a job from you one day, bro.
So good. Nice. For you listeners, I appreciate you guys obviously spending some time with us. As always, if you have any comments for us, we'd really appreciate you heading over to iTunes, leaving a review. Or you can email me at eric@athleteceo.com. Would love to hear from you and look forward to tuning in to another great episode of the Athlete CEO podcast next week.